Hello everyone, I'm Dick Tango, and today I'm going to be comparing the CR56 AMAX and RAM-7 as primary weapons in Warzone. So this is going to be comparing the long-range builds, where you'd pair it with an SMG or a shotgun. Today's video is made possible by TrueGameData.com. I'm using their stats for a lot of things I do for all of my builds. I'm currently wearing some new True Game Data merch, so be sure to go check that out. It's over on their Twitter. I do also stream. As you can see, I've got my Twitch right here, Dick Tango. There's going to be a link in the description to that as well. I'll be going live fairly often this week. I just hit affiliate the other day, and we kind of rolling with that, trying to keep some good momentum. Be sure to come check me out. I've got 186 out of 200 on my follower goal, and I've got a surprise brewing for that when I reach that goal, so be sure to step over and give me a follow. I've got two builds set up here, though, for the RAM-7 and the AMAX. For long range, they're basically the same builds for both guns. This RAM-7 is going to have the monolithic suppressor, the FSS Ranger barrel, which is the longest barrel, the VLK optic, commando foregrip for the underbarrel, and the 50-round mags, which is the biggest magazine option on the RAM-7. I'm using the commando here specifically because it's going to reduce the side-to-side bounce and more visual bounce recoil, which are harder to account for than just vertical magnitude of recoil, which you can counteract by moving your mouse in a consistent way every time you shoot. This, by the way, is the Reticent blueprint. It was in the COD shop recently for 500 COD points. I think it's a pretty nice one here, just in case anybody was wondering. And then to the AMAX, we've got the same exact thing. Monolithic suppressor, your longest barrel, VLK optic, commando foregrip, and the largest magazine, 45-round mags. With this, though, I do actually have the T-pose reticle on my VLK optic. I highly recommend this if you're running a VLK on the AMAX. It is much easier to track targets. Since the glowy parts of these reticles and the black lines are in two different layers in the optic, the way the glowy parts bounce on the AMAX for some reason visually make it very hard to keep track of what's the center of the optic and keep that on your target. I have a whole video about that. I'm going to link that down below, as well as it should pop up on the screen here in a moment. So be sure to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. It's a very quick video just to show you the benefits of running the T-pose VLK on the AMAX. This blueprint, by the way, is the Emissary blueprint with the blue spray paint camo, the Nightfall camo. I think it looks pretty nice overall with the gold accents sticking out. In case you were wondering, though, that's where the blueprint for that is. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the stats here. Just compare the pros and cons overall from a stats perspective, and then we'll get into how the guns actually handle as well in the game. So as you can see here, first thing I want to cover is the ADS time. We've got a pretty notable advantage, about 44 milliseconds on the RAM-7 over the AMAX with these builds. That's going to mean that you're going to be able to get onto target and shoot quicker with the RAM-7. Something else that's very significant in favor of the RAM-7 here, if we take a look at the movement speed and more importantly the ADS movement speed, this is going to let you strafe while shooting and make it harder for you to hit. You're going to have a pretty notable advantage for that in the RAM-7 versus the AMAX. The next thing to compare would be the bullet velocity. Here's another place where the RAM-7 has a lot of an advantage here. You are below 1,000 meters a second for the AMAX, which is pretty hard to handle. I find that around the 12 to 1,300 meter a second range, you get most of the benefit that you can get out of bullet velocity. If you go up to higher than that, like the Odin, which you can get up to 1,500, you barely notice it. But you definitely notice if you're at 1,100 or below that the bullets move slower and that you have to lead targets more. And then the reload time, this is somewhere where the AMAX very much has an advantage. Not just because it has a bit of a reload time advantage here, as you can see, but also because it has higher damage per mag. Even though it has 5 rounds less per mag, each bullet does so much more damage in most scenarios that you have a higher damage per mag, even with less bullets on the AMAX. So for the most part, it does seem like the RAM has quite a bit of advantages here, but obviously once we get into the damage, there's a different story to be told. I'm going to go ahead and look at the base stats just to give you an idea of a few extra things. The rate of fire on the AMAX is 630 RPM to the much higher 855.5 RPMs on the RAM-7. What this means is that you get through the 50-round mags on the RAM a lot quicker than the 45-round mags on the AMAX, which means that you have kind of a more punishing reload cycle, and you need to be careful with your ammo a little more with the RAM than you do with the AMAX, as well as just consuming the ammo and making sure that you actually have the ability to replenish your ammo throughout the game is more important on the RAM than it is on the AMAX. As we can see with the damage profiles, the RAM has a lot less damage per bullet than the AMAX. The AMAX does 7, 14, and 14 damage more in the closest range for the different body parts here. And if you go all the way up to, say, the farthest ranges, which are about 45 and 47 meters or more without attachments, you still have quite the advantage of like 11 damage, 10 damage, and 6 damage for the different body parts here. So you're going to do a lot more damage per bullet in basically every scenario on the AMAX than you are with the RAM-7. We'll go ahead and take a look at the TTK, and unsurprisingly, you do get a pretty big advantage here. We're looking at chest right now. You get a pretty big advantage here for the AMAX in most ranges. There are places where the AMAX and the RAM are pretty close, and you do have to keep in mind for every bullet you miss in the AMAX, it's going to take longer to get the next shot on target because of the slower fire rate. This means that missing a single bullet, especially if you're, say, in this 40 to 65 or 70 meter range, you missing one bullet on the AMAX that you don't miss on the RAM, or even both of them missing one bullet, is going to close the gap on the time to kill there. Something that is also significant to look at is the DPS. Here as well, though, you can see that the AMAX has better or very close damage per second in every range to the chest. Again, that's not very surprising with a higher damage per bullet. Something that you do need to look at here is the other parts of the body, though. If you're hitting all headshots isn't really realistic, but if you are, the damage gets very close between the RAM-7 and the AMAX, because the AMAX does a small amount more per bullet. I think it's like a 1.2 multiplier, 1.3 for the headshots, whereas the RAM is like a 1.5 multiplier for its headshots. And if you look at the extremities, the stomach and leg shots, for example, the RAM actually takes an advantage basically everywhere in time to kill, as well as in DPS. So if you were starting to miss shots to the chest, you are getting a just as good or better time to kill on the RAM. Keep in mind, of course, that it's going to depend on how much you can hit bullets accurately with each of these guns. Personally, I find the RAM-7 a lot easier to handle, but other people definitely find the AMAX easier to handle with the recoil. So keep that in mind. It's something that you need to try out for yourself and determine. What I could say overall for damage, DPS, and time to kill is that you have a fairly equal real-world output for damage from both of these guns, where the AMAX has a bit of an overall advantage when you're hitting shots. So the AMAX is going to be ahead here, and when you're talking about the mid-range fights where you both see each other at the same time and start shooting, that's going to be very important. But in those cases, let's take and add in the ADS, and even here in chest shots, the RAM and the AMAX kind of trade blows. So that slower ADS on the AMAX is going to cause a few problems. Where the AMAX really shines is taking multiple targets off guard. Say you have a good spot to hold, you have an angle as a team starts to cross an opening, you can take down 2, 3, 4 targets on a single mag with the AMAX easier than you can with the RAM. This is why it's so popular for your solo versus squad players like average Joe and in duo quad kill race tournaments as well. You see the AMAX run a lot because it has both high damage output and high damage per mag. Let's take a quick look at that damage per mag at basically every range. Even if you're looking at chest or stomach shots, either way, you're getting higher damage per mag out of the AMAX. And basically the most RAM-friendly scenarios, say at this 60 meter mark with stomach-only shots, still you have 110 damage per mag more on the RAM, and that's on the AMAX than the RAM, and that's the best case scenario for the RAM. So that's something definitely to keep in mind. Your reload is also quicker on the AMAX than the RAM. The RAM's a little slower than most ARs, whereas the AMAX is a little faster. That is a huge limitation on that gun to keep in mind. If you did want to, say, run a hollow optic on the AMAX or RAM, this is best, I'd say, if you run affected ADS, or sorry, independent ADS instead of affected, or if you run a lower FOV, or if you're a console player, where you don't necessarily need that extra zoom as much. If you do run, say, the Corp Combat Hollow, I would recommend the blue dot reticle for that, though it is a hard grind to get to. If you do run that Corp Combat Hollow, there is no ADS benefit on the AMAX, whereas the RAM-7, you get another about 13 milliseconds advantage, where it takes that ADS penalty on the difference between the RAM and the AMAX from about 2.5 frames advantage for the RAM to full 4 frames at 60 FPS for the RAM. So you are looking at quite a bit better handling on the RAM-7 when it comes to your ADS, as well as a few other things, your ADS movement, for example. These are things definitely to keep in mind here. So overall, what I would say stats-wise, AMAX has better overall damage output, especially upon multiple targets in a fight. RAM has generally quicker handling. AMAX has a better potential for shots fired in an amount of time, or damage by shots fired in an amount of time, because of its mag size and reload and fire rate. Next thing to take a look at is just how they actually physically handle with the in-game recoil. What I'll be taking a look at here is the recoil patterns, how much they do vertically, their shape, and the side-to-side bounce of the bullets on the recoil pattern lines. And then we'll also be looking at the visual recoil of the optic on the weapon and how easy it is to track targets accordingly. So first I'm going to take a look here at the RAM-7. Here. Alright, we'll get to a good spot for these recoil tests.
Team deathmatch. You are clear to
So
engage all
what I'll
threats.
do here is just look at the line here on the... Oops, I'm a little too far over on that one, that's fine, we'll just do another. And as you can see, you have up and to the left. You can see that also the first, I'd say about 10 shots go almost straight up and down. And then there is a pretty notable but not extreme amount of side-to-side bounce there. We'll do just one more to get a good idea of the consistency of this. Again, up and to the left. I'm not doing any recoil control here. I am just shooting the gun, holding the mouse in place. Let's take a look now at the AMAX and see how its recoil pattern looks. And my tack insert did not work, unfortunately. Alright, let's take a look at what this does. And looking just here at the actual recoil pattern, as you can see the first couple of shots here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, there's quite big jumps in between the rounds. So that's something to keep in mind for your first shots. Maybe aim just a little bit low so that those shots don't drive you above aiming at your target. You can see a pretty significant amount of side-to-side bounce. I would say a little more than the RAM-7 overall. As you can see, there's like a bullet here and all the way over here on the path. Whereas the RAM, I think the worst I can see is these that kind of overlap here, or this kind of wiggle side-to-side here. But yeah, there's quite a bit of these like really far outliers. You can see this bullet went right there. That one went all the way out there. So there is a little bit more of that kind of side-to-side bounce. And then your overall path of recoil here, though, on the AMAX is going to go up slightly to the left and then work back to the right. But overall, it's fairly up and down. While you're tracking, you can more or less just hold down on the stick or pull down on your mouse, and you're going to basically compensate for the recoil on the AMAX. But with the RAM, you're going to want to account first for the vertical jump here, the first 10 or so rounds that go almost straight up and down, where then it curves off to the left. So you'll want to pull down and then to the right, which is going to be a little more complex. However, you can aim low on the first few shots, let those carry you up into the upper chest, and then just pull down to the left at the same time, so you don't have to make two different moves correcting the recoil. That can help you there. With the bounciness, how much these first few bullets jump around on the AMAX versus the RAM, this is something else to consider in depth, because the RAM lets you get on a target, especially one that isn't moving very much, and rip your first several shots with a very, very simple to account for recoil pattern. In fact, what you can do, depending on the range, you can aim like lower stomach or middle stomach and let it carry you right into the head and very reliably get quick kills that way. You can also, just to be safe, hit legs and let it carry you up into the chest, because there's absolutely no damage penalty. Hitting legs, stomach, or chest is all the same. Whereas the AMAX, you do get notably more damage going from legs and stomach to the chest. You are going to want to hit those chest shots as much as possible. So you're going to have to be a little tighter on your recoil control on the AMAX than you are with the RAM. The gist of actually playing with these guns is that, which do you struggle with more? Ammo conservation and usage during a fight, like matching your reload times and not shooting too many bullets off at a target and screwing yourself over later? Or do you have more trouble with your recoil control hitting your targets consistently? Whichever one you do better and worse at is going to determine which gun's better, because the AMAX, if you can get that recoil control down, is probably better overall, as long as, of course, you're hitting your shots. Whereas the RAM, if you're struggling a bit more with the recoil, probably going to be your better bet. But of course, that's up to you as well, because a lot of people struggle with this up into the left path. The last thing I want to take a look at is the visual bounce on these two guns. Just see how they look when you actually fire them. Since this is going the T-pose versus the standard reticle on these two guns, you will just want to take maybe a look at the AMAX video I did again. That's down in the description, and just see how that looks. But if you watch the red dot very closely here on the RAM, you can see that it doesn't wobble a lot. It just follows the tracking very neatly. There's not a whole lot of bounce forward and back with the actual like ring around the optic towards you. It's not very distracting. It's fairly simple to look at. So that one's nice and easy to handle. But if you look here at the AMAX, when you shoot it, the visual bounce is all over the place. And keep in mind, this T-pose being the easier of the two, in my opinion, compared to the normal reticle to watch, because you can see it wobbles all over the place, and it's off and kind of up and to the left when it does so. So you're going to have to keep that in mind, because more or less the bullets are still going center of the actual reticle. So you're going to want to keep that in mind when you track targets. Personally, I use the T-pose because it is simpler to keep your eye in the middle versus the dot, which bounces around like crazy. Again, check out that video on it. So I would say overall, visually, the RAM is easier to handle. The gist of this is basically that the AMAX has damage and overall damage per mag potential advantage over the RAM in most scenarios, whereas the RAM has quicker ADS, overall easier handling, assuming you like the recoil pattern, and more reliable visual feedback that will help you hit your shots. These guns are very, very similar. I don't think there's a wrong choice between the two. Try them both, get a feel for them, give them a shot. So it's been a little bit of a long video here, But just a quick reminder that I do stream twitch.tv/DickTango. I will be on several times this week, so be sure to check me out. If you liked the video, please give it a like and or a comment. Give me a subscribe if you haven't. I've got more great content coming, so be sure to check that out. And thanks for stopping in.